Papers have sent shockwaves across the globe. 11 million documents allegedly showing how the rich and powerful use tax havens. That is our top story tonight. It is being dubbed as the biggest ever leak of confidential information. 11 million documents allegedly leaked from a law firm in Panama show how the rich and powerful set up offshore entities in tax havens. The law firm in question is Mossack Fonseca, the world's fourth largest offshore service provider. The list has been revealed by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists who've partnered with the Indian Express newspaper in India. The list includes over 500 Indians. Reacting to the expose, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley has said that he spoke with the Prime Minister this morning about the expose and that a group with officials from the Central Bureau of Excise and Customs, along with the Reserve Bank of India and the Financial Intelligence Unit, the FIU, will look into the matter. But let's get a few facts straight. An offshore account in itself is not illegal. Many people named in this expose claim that their investments have the necessary regulatory approvals. In this special discussion, we will attempt to answer the key questions. Joining us is the team from the Indian Express behind the Panama Papers, journalists Ritu Sareen and P. Vaidyanathan Iyer. Also joining us, Dinesh Kanabar of Dhruva Advisors and Rohan Shah. Appreciate you joining us. Ritu Sareen, let me start by asking you, the database comprising 11 million files finally threw up about 36,957 India-related entities. How hard was it for you at the Indian Express to track them down? I believe you've only been able to verify about 300 of those 36,957. Take us through the process of this investigation.
The sound is not very clear, but yes, as time progressed on the investigation, the task became more and more daunting. And that was also because ICIJ on their search engine kept loading more and more data. So if we logged any data, that would become redundant by the time new data was loaded. And as far as verification is concerned, we logged all the addresses that we could possibly get in small towns, big towns, metropolitan towns, etc. And we made an attempt to visit each one of those locations. In several places, we found houses had been sold or the building had been sold, people were not there, they had moved abroad, variety of reasons. So we tracked and covered and profiled only those people who we could, one, catch physically, and two, get a reaction from. Because it's very important in the interest of journalism to give them an occasion and opportunity to say what they want to.
Right. Since you're talking about getting responses, Ritu, and I'll ask Vaidyanathan to also comment on that. For instance, companies like DLF, and you have carried their response in full in the Indian Express this morning, seem to suggest that they have complied with all the relevant regulations of the Reserve Bank of India, of the income tax authorities. They've made full disclosure. So why then was their name and the name of the promoter, KP Singh, carried as if there is enough evidence of money laundering or tax evasion?
It's very, it's not so simple. Normally, I think the department, that is the CBDT, may open up, if they want to, and if they send notices, income tax returns, that is ITRs, for a period of 10 years. They will have to see when these people say someone is saying I was an NRI, when did he become an NRI? And how much was the LRS limit at that point of time, when did it increase? So it's the department that has to really examine and see if there were any loopholes.
You're absolutely right on that, and we are going to see the government now get into action as well. Yes, go ahead, Ritu.
Yeah, we have got many simplistic responses saying I'm an NRI, or this was all the LRS route, but it'll all have to be part of scrutiny now.
Oh, absolutely. It will have to be part of scrutiny. And before I get the tax experts in, Vaidhi, let me ask you, because, there is the pre-2004 period. As Ritu was mentioning, that's the liberalized remittance scheme, and that's when the Reserve Bank came out with the LRS, or the liberalized remittance scheme. How many of these 300 verified entities that have been verified for the Indian Express fall under the pre-2004 period? Have you been able to establish that?
This is an ongoing investigation, and we are tracking lots of data. We have lists of Indians who are only directors. We have lists of Indians who are only BOs. We have lists of Indians who have passports on the data. So it's work in progress.
It is work in progress. Whether you want to quickly comment on that before I get the tax experts in?
Yeah, we can say with a lot of confidence that there are a lot of people who are pre-2004 as well, which clearly shows that, this mode of transfer or remittance happened, much before even RBI allowed it. And even during the period 2004 to 2000 till date, when our remittances have been allowed, Shireen, I think there are lots of issues which need to be looked at. So if you just look at the Finance Ministry statement today on BVI, which Ritu had led that investigation. She did the stories on BVI, that offshore leaks which the Indian Express did. In that also, the same questions were asked, whether everything is legal, because remittances were allowed way back in 2004, and it doesn't really require, more than a few $100s to start a company, because the shares can be of no par value, and it requires just $200-300 to register a company. So then the finance minister today comes and discloses that they have found undisclosed income of 2,000 crores. So then of course the finance ministry did look at it much more deeply than we could ever imagine, right?
I'd like to add to
Absolutely.
that, because that was the BVI investigation done by us, that is ICIJ and Indian Express. It was much smaller in scope, but the important thing is that the breakthrough there was that it was the first time that the CBDT could track the second layer and the third layer of secrecy. Once they sent a complaint to the BVI got back to them with information on what assets had been created by that offshore entity. And then we went to that asset, whether, the government, that is. The government went to that asset, property, bank accounts, etc. And that's where the money has come from.
Okay, so very important questions being raised by this investigation. Of course, one, the blurred lines between tax planning, tax avoidance and tax evasion. And the other important aspect that both Ritu and Vedi were talking about, that is lifting the corporate veil, so to speak, to unravel the ultimate beneficiaries. But let me bring in Rohan Shah and Dinesh Kanabar. Mr. Kanabar, let me start by asking you, what do you see as the immediate implications of this investigation?
So the first and foremost thing, I think the questions which you ask, Shireen, which are very relevant, is there are documents, and those documents seem to suggest people having accounts overseas. And as you rightly began your conversation, merely having an account overseas is not something which is illegal. How do we basket the three types of people out here? People who are non-residents. So one heard about people who are non-residents being part of larger families here and who have been overseas for several years. People who have legitimately sent monies under a liberalized remittance scheme, and others who have genuinely sort of sent monies out. And in the last category, it's not merely tax avoidance and tax evasion. If the last category is indeed there, then there is issue of violation of Foreign Exchange Management Act. There are issues with regard to Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So a huge set of issues which come in there. But are we really painting all the people in the same brush? I do agree with what has been mentioned by Indian Express, that there is a need for an investigation. But as it always happens, Shireen, before the investigation results in any results, we are going to see media really painting everybody in the very same brush. And that's a cause for concern, because you're going to tarnish people's name out there.
Okay, that of course is perhaps collateral damage as far as some investigations like this are concerned. But Rohan Shah, let me ask you specifically, because this is a point that Mr. Kanabar has mentioned, this is a point that Ritu Sareen and Vedi are also talking about. Let's look at the pre-2004 period, because that is when the LRS did not exist. The liberalized remittance scheme by the Reserve Bank did not exist. If someone, and of course, as Vedi was pointing out, this list does seem to suggest that there are several what they call outliers pre-2004. What will now be the implications for those entities, for those individuals? I'll come to what happens post the RBI FAQ of 2010 and post the RBI notification of August 5th, 2013. That's an entirely different category. But what happens to the so-called outliers before the LRS came into existence in 2004?
Shireen, what you're going to have to look at in this entirety of proceedings is the factor that A, is the source of that income legitimate? Has tax been appropriately borne? And if a remittance has been made outside of the country, was that compatible with the foreign exchange provisions operating at the relevant point in time? You're probably also going to have to see whether incomes which legitimately ought to have come to India were somehow diverted. Now, all of these issues will get looked at both pre-2004 and post. It is just that post, once you have the LRS, there is then clearly a mechanism to justify, at least from a foreign exchange perspective, as to the legality of the outward remittance. So to my mind, all of these are going to be fact-based. You will have to sift through the facts. One of the dangers as what you call collateral, but to me it's very, very important. The fact that somebody who does not deserve to be painted in this manner has to go through this, even if everything is legal, I just don't think stands the standard of fairness that we expect in our judicial system.
Vedi, let me get Vedi to respond to that. Vedi, you want to respond to the comment both Dinesh Kanabar and Rohan Shah are making?
Can you please repeat it for me, Shireen, if you don't mind?
Yes, the point that both Dinesh Kanabar and Rohan Shah are making is that, it might be collateral damage because the way that these lists have been put out and the names have been put out does seem to suggest that all of them perhaps have been involved in either tax evasion or perhaps even money laundering. While the case may be different, the facts may reveal something very different. How do you respond to that?
I'm certain because, say I will, as we said in our Indian Express explained on the entire issue. See, we have dealing with a regulatory regime from 2004, pre-2004, the FERA time, and then 2004 remittances allowed, and till date, till say 2013 when actually investments were allowed to be made by individuals for setting up companies, wholly owned subsidiaries or joint ventures, right? So there is a lot of period in between where RBI has held meetings with intermediaries, the service providers, so to say, can be chartered accountant firms or even law firms, where they have said what their intent is. So it is entirely possible where, say, the letter of the law has been met or has been adhered to by individuals, but the spirit of the law is something we will definitely raise the issue of whether it is proprietary to do certain things, right? So, I would say that, it
boils down to an issue of propriety as well. The spirit of the law may not have been adhered to, whereas the letter of the law may have been adhered to. But let me just get some technicalities in as well here, because perhaps those are the loopholes that have been explored by certain individuals and certain entities as well. And that has to do with this business of the acquisition of companies, because that seems to be a technicality perhaps that has been used by way of getting around the RBI regulations. Rohan Shah and Dinesh Kanabar, both of you, if you want to comment on that, and let me start by asking you, Rohan Shah, on this business of using the acquisition route to try and get around the regulations.
Yeah. Shireen, let me also engage with the issue in terms of the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. Quite clearly, the letter of the law emerges also pretty much from a foundation of what we believe is correct and ethical in the context of the law. And the moment the letter of the law effectively lays down a basis to say that to do the following is legal, but to do the following is illegal, then for us to sort of say that if you followed what the legislature in its wisdom said was the correct way of doing things, but you then put on that a spin in terms of saying, well, why was it within the spirit? I think that completely dilutes the whole basis of what we mean by rule of law or what we mean by the structure of the law. So, for us to sanctify some of this, to say, oh, well, it's not consistent with the spirit. Spirit is very individualistic and therefore very, very, very euphemistic. And from my perspective, if the law exists and somebody has, in a manner, acted consistent with the law, reported to you that I have done this, then I don't think, we can bring the ghost of the spirit back to say, this should continue to haunt you.
Okay, fair point. Dinesh Kanabar, very quickly.
So, and I totally agree with what Rohan says. In fact, I can't even really, in this particular case, really distinguish between the letter and the spirit of the law. And I'll tell you why. If you have made a remittance overseas using the liberalized remittance scheme, and I'll come to the specific question which you are talking about, acquisition of a company versus setting up of a company. But before that, let me just explain to you. If you have made a remittance overseas, you are required to report it to the Reserve Bank of India. That reporting entails not only where you have sent the money, but what has happened with the money. Everything is right under the glare of Reserve Bank of India. If it has been used in a company, you have something like place of effective management, which is now being introduced to say the income can be taxed in India. Even earlier, if a foreign company was totally managed in India, its income was liable to tax in India. So really, I'm also struggling to see what is this whole issue regarding spirit of law versus the letter of the law. And just coming to the point which you made, there was an FAQ which was issued by the Reserve Bank of India, which spoke about whether a remittance from India can be used for setting up of a company. And the point really is, first of all, that FAQ is neither a circular nor a notification. All that it says is that you cannot use the money to set up a company. If somebody has acquired a company, by definition it has been reported to Reserve Bank, and the Reserve Bank does not agree, it will raise the query with those relevant people. And the activities which are happening within those companies, assuming some of those activities are hiding something, it is right under the glare of Reserve Bank, which can really investigate all of it.
It's incumbent on the Reserve Bank to have acted on that. On that note, we are going to have to take a break, but when we return, we continue our discussion here on what the Panama leaks mean for India. That and more when we get back.